implications then of incarnational theology. We kind of define that, and we've also recorded some other banter. I don't know, other good discussion today. So we'll hopefully have a couple another little bonus episode or something out here soon. So as long as somebody gets
Why are you looking at
to
me?
working on getting all this stuff uploaded. So if incarnational theology is important, if that matters, so if it does matter, we think that it does. What's the implication then, Mr. Jake? Pastor Jake.
So the whole conversation about incarnational theology, right, is that place matters, that the concrete world matters, and it's this rejection of a dualism that exists between the spiritual and the physical, right? Or the belief that what's most significant and most important is spiritual things, heavenly realm, and that the physical is just a lesser, even some cases damned version, of that, right? So
therefore making the physical insignificant.
Insignificant, right? Yeah. So it doesn't matter, right? What difference does it make if we take care of our bodies or not? Right. What difference does it make if we take care of creation or our communities, right? So the value in the incarnational theology or theology of place is that the physical world, the places that we live, they have significance, and their significance is sacred. There's something sacred about them. So one of the things that one of the ways to think about this, at least in terms of place, is what does it look like to seek the shalom of the place God has put you? What does it look like to seek, or as the language that gets used while the Israelites are in exile, is the blessing and prosperity, right, of this place. And certainly all throughout Scripture, there is this constant validation of place, and even when the Israelites are in exile, God tells them, "Here's what you should do: plant gardens, marry, and be given in marriage." Right? These are embodied practices. Work the blessing and prosperity of Babylon. When they return to Jerusalem, it's rebuild and renovate, make the community livable again. So what does it look like for us then as the church to exist for the sake of the place God has put us? So often in the church, especially here in the West, we are this kind of enclosed, encapsulated body that just meets together in our sacred gatherings, right? And the connections we have to the community are personal. This is my neighborhood. This is where I work. This is the place where my kids go to school. Rather than looking at it and saying, no. What is this church as a body of people? What do we do to seek the shalom of the place that God has put us, to seek the blessing and prosperity of it? So one of the things you have to do is define your place. What is the place? What is the parish? And as pastors, that starts with us. If we can define our place, our people will be able to define it. And that's one of the questions that missiologists and church researchers, when they've worked on these projects, they go and they ask people in churches, what is your parish? What's your place? And most of the time, people can't answer it. See, and so there's kind of these two dominant models in this conversation for the church. And they're one is parish, we're talking about, which is defining the place where your church exists and saying, this is the place for which we are responsible. We're going to seek the shalom of this place and be a church that exists for the sake of this place, which is multifaceted, it's dynamic, and you have to be willing to embody certain practices in that, practices that are what some call even if practices. These are the things we're going to do even if they don't produce results, even if they don't bring more people in, even if we die trying. Yep. Why? Because it's our story. This is who we are. This is what it means to be the people of God in this place. The other model, which has been the prevailing model for the church, is a niche church, right? Where we find our niche in the market. what do we want? What do we want to be? What kind of a church do we want to be? Who is our target audience? And when you go to church planting conferences or have those conversations, good church planting models typically follow that logic. Choose your audience, create a homogenic environment that they're going to feel comfortable in, and you can grow a church, and you find your niche in the market. And this is so church A is the from the blank church, and church B is that church, and church C is that. But in that model, all we do is exist for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Our resources, our energy, our efforts, our mission, our ministries are revolve around us. And most of the time we get out, it's been real popular the last 10, 15 years for churches to embody, to say we need a mission statement. And most of the time that mission statement is love God, love others, serve the world. Or because that's the great commandment, right?
Sure. Yep.
So when we do the serve the world thing, we find ways for us to go out in the community real quick. We do a little special thing. We feel good about ourselves. We serve the world, and we come back to our church, and it's geared around us. That's one model, and it's been the prevailing model, and most of us operate out of that, or have been trained to operate out of that, intrinsically. Like it's just our nature. That's how we do it without even thinking about. And it really requires us to recondition ourselves to saying, wait a second, we're not going to be a niche. We're not going to be a church that says this is our thing, or we exist for ourselves. What does it look for us to be a church that exists for this place? So the questions that we have to answer then are, what kind of roots are we going to put down? Because rootedness is what ties us to the community. And a church without roots in that community, it doesn't have the ability. You don't have a connection, so you're not bothered or moved by the things that do or do not happen, the problems that exist there. So put down roots. What is the place God is asking you to be a part of, right? So what is define that parish, and being sensitive to the Holy Spirit to know that, how He directs that, and then what are you going to do to seek that shalom? How are you going to water that? How are you going to identify the problems that exist there and make those problems your problems? That's a totally different paradigm of thinking about ministry. I mean, our way of thinking about ministry has been, what are the programs that we can employ? What are the outreaches that we can do that get people to come to us? If you notice, there's not a lot of room in that to be thinking of ways to serve ourselves.
Yeah.
Because everything you do is thinking about that. And so the argument is kind of that if place matters, then the church needs to be engaged in their community and working for its benefit and exists for it. And if that's, so that requires us to do some really hard work. You have to rethink everything you do. How are your worship services geared towards your community? Do they reflect your community, right? So if you live in a community with certain demographics or certain, you had better, are your worship services geared towards that community? So case in point, right? Most churches across America worship sometime between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings. And we have for the last several hundred years. Why? We were an agrarian society.
Yeah.
And that was a time that worked. Well, now, in our community, we live in a blue-collar community where the biggest employers are prisons, hospital system, and what little manufacturing there is. And those jobs are not 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. So is your worship service, even the way you time it and structure it, geared towards the place God has put you? Or are they about what you want to do?
Just a quick counterpoint. There was a gentleman I know. He has a church in Indiana, and there's I forget exactly where it is. Doesn't matter. But they have kind of a summer. It's a decent size amusement park. I mean, maybe not probably quite on scale with Six Flags or Cedar Point or anything like that. But same thing. Years ago, they really found that there was a group of people that worked at that amusement park that really hungered for a service. And so the same thing, but the place is open by whatever time it was. I mean, so they were doing it was pretty early. I don't know if it was like a 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. Sunday morning, but I mean, that service ended up being almost as big as their normal church service. It had 70 or 80 people coming to it. And it was predominantly everybody that worked at the amusement park that hungered, right, for some sort of a Sunday morning service. Now, again, right, you're asking a lot of your volunteers, right, and people to come in extra early on a Sunday morning.
Yep.
But, ended up ministering. And then again, I don't know if they're still doing it or not, but it's that same kind of thing of going, hey, we have a group of people here that there's a need here that we can meet. And again, what are we willing, right? This is the incarnational, back to the physical, right? We're going to roll up our sleeves, get up even earlier on a Sunday morning, make Sunday morning that much longer of a day, but be able to serve, right? Be able to serve a need to our folks.
Well, that's a perfect example, too, of finding what are the holes in the community? What are the gaps?
Yeah.
Who are the people who aren't being served? And again, your motive in doing that is not to say, okay, so we're going to go and do this because it'll grow the church necessarily, or because it's going to bring us more money. We're doing that because it's our story. It's who we are. So that's one of the things we have to constantly think about is what the difference there. Are these productive activities?
Sure.
Or are these practices that are part of our DNA?
Well, so our church, we sit just a mile or two outside of town, and the same thing. The last few years, like we've noticed with our vacation Bible schools, right? The attendance of that has just really dropped off, and the same thing we kind of identified too of going, we really only have our kids showing up now, right? It's no longer the community kids, and so the same thing of going, are we willing to still put in the time, the money, and what if we move VBS to the church park? Right? That it's a central location. It's a place where kids can walk to. We're not having to worry about transportation, those kind of things. And again, sadly, nothing's come of that. But it's that same kind of thing of going, okay, what are we... And we've even talked even with some of the other churches going, why do we not team up on this? And again, does it have to be a 5-day thing? Maybe it's a one-shot, one-day kind of carnival type, And so just those things, I think, right, where we reimagine some of those things, right? You go, what is it that we can do that's actually going to help us, right? Again, what's the purpose of Vacation Bible School? We've got a whole generation of kids that don't even know a Bible story, right? And so let's do something that's in town that people can get to. And this is, we did a thing a couple years ago. I love my city, right? That was pretty. I mean, again, the general idea, right, was that everybody would kind of cancel their services on a Sunday morning. We would come together, had an abbreviated service or whatever, but and I tell you what, that was, you talk about a life-giving moment for the church, right? Not your church, or my church, but the church of St. Louis. And you know what? I'll dog on my own people a little bit. We had folks that just didn't show up to it, right? Because it wasn't typical. It didn't look. And and I've told my people. So I feel safe saying this because I've said this. You missed out.
Yeah.
You missed out on a life-giving moment for the church of St. Louis in the community. And what do we do? Then we went around, and the same thing. I saw some folks from our church that sadly have not seen them engage much in the last 2 years who were alive in that moment. One of our guys got to kind of be a team leader for one of the teams that was going out, and we just went around the community, right? There were different projects. I think there was some painting the pool house. There was picking up trash. There was, just all these kind of different projects. It was a great bonding moment for the city. And the same thing, even one of the crews that I was out, just interacting with some of the other neighbors going, wow, Sunday morning, what are you guys doing? You're not in church, right? And you go, hey.
Well, and some of this revolves around your willingness to redefine the things that qualify or even meet the standard of what service is. Because I think you hinted at this, and you've kind of hinted at it as well. A lot of times our definitions of what it means to serve the community are much more reflective of what we have wanted to do, what makes us comfortable, what makes us feel all warm and gooey inside because we get to do something that we want to do. Canceling service on a Sunday. I remember that conversation when we were talking, and there were more than a couple of us that were going, I don't know. I'm not so sure my people are on board. And even some pastors struggled with that mindset of, Because again, part of the struggle is, this is an even if practice. Mm-hmm. This is exactly
Absolutely.
an even if practice, because
Not one of our churches grew as a result
yes,
of
that's
that.
right. And the potential to miss out on, let's get right down to it. The potential of missing out on tithes that would pay our bills was real high. Now, we tried to address that and there were baskets for each of the churches at the one location that we met at, and had the little pre-service kind of deal, and that's fine. And I don't know about you guys, but I know we didn't bring in what we normally would have brought in on a given Sunday.
Yeah.
But it was important enough for the pastors that everybody said, this matters more than those quantifiable things. Mm-hmm. Did we grow? Doesn't matter. Did we miss out on tithe? Okay, we're willing to risk it.
This might be
why? Because it's who we are. This is a part of our story.
Yeah.
And this this might be one of the good things that comes out of COVID, right? Is that you go, look, we've had a very disruptive Sunday pattern for a year.
Right. Yeah.
You know, missing out on tithes or offerings, or missing out on announcements or communion or whatever it may be. And the church is still going. Mm-hmm. Right? Church is still going. And so, and again, in that scenario, we elected, our leader said, you know what, we still would like to have a service. We had same thing, we had an early service. Attendance was not usually what it was, but I'm telling you, we had folks show up in work clothes, ready to go, right? Still had a service.
Yeah.
Came, and again, so, here's one of the downsides of COVID, right, is that we were excited, right, as a ministerial association, going, all right, what is I Love My City 2 going to look like?
Right.
Everything was canceled this last spring, know. And so that's kind of a sad thing, because again, I hope that's something that we can recapture.
It was
forward, but
that event was incredible because it was planned with only about 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. We really was the planning of it, and it just grew. And we had 250 people who showed up for it. It was way above and beyond what we thought was going to happen. Yeah. And so the whole purpose behind I Love My City was, as a church, to say, this place matters.
Yeah.
This place. And so what are the problems of this place? What are the problems in this community? And what are we going to do to address them? I tell you, our city government has never looked so fondly upon the church as they did that day. Just a few weeks before that, I was at our city hall. One of our state representatives was there kind of holding office hours where people could come in and talk with him about stuff. And I had stopped in for something unrelated. And our city manager said, this is Pastor Jake. And totally redirected the conversation from what I was there to talk about to say, here's what they're planning for our community. And we're so excited for this event. And it was like he was beaming with pride over what the churches in St. Louis were doing and being... And again, we didn't do that to make us look good.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. We were trying to be the faithful people of God, demonstrating our love for this place.
But there's that shalom breaking through.
Right, exactly.
You have somebody going,
right.
Is this what church is supposed to look like? Mm-hmm. Count me in.
Yeah, right. Yes. Because I think when that starts to happen, it helps people rediscover what the church was meant to be. Mm-hmm. It is no longer just a country club that I go to and I pay my dues and I get certain benefits of the country club. That becomes a secondary thing, if that. Mm-hmm. But the church becomes that thing that serves and leans into the community in such a way that people who don't have any connection to that local body of the church go, hey, it is a really good thing that you guys are here. Because largely, that is not the opinion, and hasn't been the opinion of civic leaders for a long time.
Right.
And part of what we're discovering is that it takes some stepping outside of our comfort zones of being willing to cancel a service on a given Sunday and engage in the community and forego the tithes that might come in, and forego our comfort zone and do something that feels more like a Saturday. Because there was even some conversation, well, maybe we'll just shift it to Saturday, that way we don't sacrifice Sunday morning. You're missing the point.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when people saw us out during the church time, which is, 9 to 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and people go, oh, wait a minute. You guys decided not to go have your service, but you decided to go out and do something in the community. That speaks volumes. Saturday morning, who cares?
Right.
Because that's what people do on Saturday
That's
mornings.
what the world does.
Yeah.
Right. So this is part of us being being different. So on that day, one of my job was really just kind of floating around, making sure all of these different teams had what they needed, and I was running on like crazy. It was so unbelievable to drive around the city and see these. We all had these I Love My City shirts on, and to just see people doing all of these different jobs. The city felt so alive, right? So the discipline for us in the church is to think creatively about how do we exist for this place, and that was just one thing.
Yep.
But this is part of the changing dynamics in our world. The church has existed in this vacuum, where this silo. You live your life out there. You come here on Sundays, when it fits in your schedule. You don't have anything better to do, and you're not too tired from Saturday.
Yeah.
And get people to understand, the church is a way of being. It's a community. It's a new kind of community. It's a way of being that transcends the rest of our lives and the rest of the world. It's not siloed from it. And to get them to understand, what matters as much as our Bible studies or our VBSs or our Sunday school classes or our style of worship or our engaging preaching is what we're doing the other 6 days a week, living as the people of God in this place. How are we as individuals, how is our family seeking the shalom of the place God has put us? How are we seeking shalom in our places of work?
Mm-hmm.
How are we seeking shalom in their schools? What is the church? And if the church wants to be relevant at all in this changing world, if we want to regain any sense of credibility or worth in our world, we have to start addressing and speaking to the issues that exist in our world and making the world's problems our problems, instead of just saying, you guys take care of all that. Just come here on Sundays at 11 a.m. and Wednesdays for prayer meeting.
And we'll address
give your tithes.
And we'll address your spiritual needs, never mind the physical.
We'll address exactly. So I mean, so this is a huge shift in thinking for us. This is not just a subtle, begin to focus over here. This is a complete rejection of one way of understanding ministry and engaging in an entirely new way that says, what we do is not what's most important. What's most important is how we live and function and exist for the sake of this place.
Yeah.
So incarnational theology of place.
Yeah.
Right? So what is your place, your parish? Again, I think we hear that more in the Catholic tradition. But again, right, it's not just about the building, right? It is the parish, the people, the community.
Yeah.
So what kinds of roots do you want to put down? Right? That's the... one other resource, Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, he has a book called Jiminy Christmas, my brain, it's not good. The Wisdom of Stability is the name of the book. It's that same kind of thing, right, being planted there. And then how are you going to go about watering? And I think I like what you said, how are you going to make the community's problems our problems? So there's hopefully some practicality to incarnational theology. So thanks for tuning in. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, all those good things, and we'll hopefully have some regular content
soon
in the pipeline.
Very soon.
Thank you, and God bless. Oh no.